as I am delving deeper into my study on what the future holds for us and how we can future-proof ourselves. I'm thrilled to have with us Ankoor Warikoo, who is an internet entrepreneur based out of India, one of India's top content creators, best-selling author, and someone who also conducts online courses, so is also an educator. His aim through his content and his writing is to make sure all the choices you make in life come from a point of awareness and not ignorance. Ankur is also an active angel investor in 30 plus companies, has over 10 million followers across all popular social media platforms. He didn't start his trajectory being a content creator. In fact, he went down a traditional path, getting an undergraduate degree in physics and then dropping out of his master's in Michigan State, topping it up with an MBA. So I guess he'll talk to us a little bit of his education and where he thought that was going. He has written a book called Do Epic Shit, which went on to hit India's #1 bestseller. His second book, Get Epic Shit Done, also hit #1 in India. He's working currently on his third book on money. I'm pretty confident this conversation is going to be super epic. So I'm ready to talk to Ankur Warikoo and delve into what the future holds for us. Ankur, thank you so much for doing this for us.
Thank you so much for the very warm introduction, Vibha. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right, terrific. So, Ankur, when we started talking about this book and we said, hey, let's write a book about the future. The future is interesting. We not need to keep a pulse on the future. And people say, why think about the future? Think about the now, right? People like to live in the now. Our spiritual gurus say, live in the moment, live in the now. Who cares about the future? But we want to talk about the future. So, from your vantage point, as someone who creates content, is it important to think about the future?
Well, yes and no. Yes, because your future depends on it. No, because nobody can predict the future, certainly not me. And the only hope in hell that we have is not to be in a position where we know exactly what's going to happen, because that is, in my opinion, highly unlikely. What is a better position to be is to build the mindset that prepares you for the future, irrespective of what the future unfolds. And that's something that I actively speak about. And I often say that, particularly in the Indian culture, there is this tradition of getting done with your education, whether it's school or college and your postgrad or your final degree, just get it done with and settle in life and start working. But that era is clearly over. And I do believe that as lives extend much beyond the normal lifespan that we see today, I do believe that kids who are born right now will live beyond 100 years, maybe even 150, perhaps never die naturally. And nothing that they are being taught or are being prepared for is going to prepare them for the future that none of us can predict. And the only hope in hell then we have is to remain a student, to agree to the fact that you're going to have multiple careers, to agree to the fact that you'll have multiple lives, to agree to the fact that you will not know one life from the other. And the basic necessary critical requirement will be for you to become a student and to learn something completely new without the organized intervention of school and college that you had the luxury.
I'm going to get into skilling and all much later. This was just like, so in terms of like, is it important to think about the future? You said yes and no.
100%, but
100%.
not to the extent that you can predict it.
Not to the extent that you can predict it. Okay, so difficult to predict the future, but since our lives depend on our future, probably keep a pulse on the future. Okay, now if we're going to keep a pulse on the future, you're keeping your pulse on the future. What are trends you're seeing around you? What are you? Are you seeing trends in everyone's talking about technology, sustainability, geopolitics? What are you seeing, and how is it really impacting your life and your work?
There are three clear trends that I'm witnessing. Number one is the destruction of geographical boundaries when it comes to work. There was a time when work was a destination. It was either an office or a city or perhaps even a country. Now it's just becoming more and more fluid, and it certainly will be in the future. So I don't think people will be geographically constrained in one lat long when it comes to work. Number two, with AI coming in, a lot more of the repetitive administrative work, which is either calculative in nature or predictive in nature, is going to go to the machines. And that begs the question, what will be the work left for humans to do? And I think it'll be more around judgment and to manage those machines and to make sure that they are being responsible. And then number three, I do believe that people will not work as long as we have as a generation, and certainly our parents did.
Sure.
I think a lot of them will choose to opt out of the workforce as early as in their 30s, perhaps 40s at best. And there'll be several other things that will just enable them to do that. Um, these will be the clear trends. Now, where does it lead to? As I said, anybody's guess, but I'm very clearly witnessing these trends more and
Okay.
more so.
Now, I'm going to take each of the things you've talked about, maybe go a little bit in more depth. Are you also seeing any trends in consumer behavior? Your target audience largely is the youth, is the Indian youth. Have you seen any shifts already in the last couple of years? And what sort of shifts are you seeing in terms of the way people consume content, content preferences, duration of content? What's going on in the consumer?
Several trends. One is attention spans are decreasing, so there's a lot more adoption of short form content than one expected. At the same time, it's coinciding with a lot more depth in areas that are predetermined by the consumer. So there are clearly interventions that they make. Hey, I want to dig deeper into this, and there is enough and more content available to help them with that desire. So it's a nice happy mix where most of the surface is around short form, and then there is a slightly niche audience that's going deeper, and both of them coexist. I also feel that the ambition and the pace of ambition has
Mhm.
gone manifold up. We were, as a generation, both patient and also content in what we were getting and when we were getting it. But there's this entire generation that just wants it now and also wants it far bigger. And they also, to their credit, have the opportunities to make it happen. So why not? And that's clearly coinciding with how the content is that they consume and the nature of or the velocity of their work and their actions. And number three, which was very interesting, there was a recent survey that was conducted in the US, and I think it'll be reflective of India as well. A lot of people believe that you don't have to work hard anymore to be successful in life. And I think there is some merit in that. While working hard is just considered this very honorable thing, but for a large part of our generation, working hard was also physical labor, just
Yeah.
working hard and sweating it out. And I do believe that the world's changed where physical labor is not so much of a requirement, but more of a choice. And you would much rather work hard in the gym than be working hard on the streets and in the office to make shit happen. And from that perspective, your intellectual agency and your capability is a far more important determinant of your success than your physical grind or your in-person activity as such. And I'm not surprised that there's an entire generation that's transposing that and extrapolating it to, oh, working hard is not important anymore to succeed because you can be smart about it and still make things happen.
Mm. Okay, but I mean, do you really believe in this? Working hard and not putting in, like, so Narayan Murthy put out this post about 70-hour week, right? Led to all this backlash. But you work very hard. I follow you. I follow your post. I've read your daily schedule. It is an intense schedule. You come across as really sort of cool, breezy, airy. When you talk, you're so relatable. But there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes, and I'm hoping a lot of the young people watching you also read your hectic schedule. So isn't this a bit of a myth, and isn't it a bit of sort of a convenience that young people are sort of adopting this mindset? Hey, I don't need to really work hard. I mean, we work really hard. We are where we are because we work hard. Content creators work very hard. So is there a little bit of a myth or a sort of facade that young people can't see beyond because they're watching everything through their screens today?
There's a little bit of truth in that, but not entirely, because you choose your hard to the point where the hard is no longer hard. For example, while it may seem to somebody else that I work hard, but in my head, I don't work hard. I really have a wonderful life where I work for less than 20 hours a week and I get things done, and I'm in complete control of my time. And all the decisions that I do make around my routine are decisions that are not forced upon me, but
Mm,
are my choices. I feel that a lot of people correlate working hard to being forced to work hard.
mm,
And that is actually true for a lot of people where they're not in a position of power or
choice.
privilege to
Okay,
dictate how hard they work.
correct.
They have no choice but to.
Sure.
But if you had the choice, that choice will then define what your hard is. So
Sure.
for me, that routine is working hard, but it isn't in my head. For someone else, it may be. But for someone else, meeting 10,000 people a day would be joyous, and it will seem like a drain for somebody who doesn't want to do that.
Okay, so that's a beautiful distinction. So, you're when you're in control of your choices, it doesn't seem like you're working so hard, as opposed to, we both been in corporate America, those jobs. And those are jobs where you don't get to control your time in your life. You might put in the same amount of hours today, but at least, you have the privilege of choice. So I think that's a beautiful distinction. Now, if you're seeing this privilege of choice becoming sort of the preferred modus operandi, are you seeing more gig economy jobs coming through in the future? Do you see young people working gig jobs and not full-time regular jobs?
100%. As I started, the geographical boundaries are diminishing, and that instantly leads to the gig economy becoming one of the most dominant forms of future of work, where people will not have set hours, they will not have set roles, they will not have set brands, they will not carry business cards. They will not be able to answer the question, where do you work? Because they will just say, I'm a freelancer and I work with multiple people at the same time. And all of that will be something that they say by pride and not by virtue of any embarrassment or shame attached to it. And that, I think, is wonderful. I have, for example, a team that works with me, a total of 11 people, of which 4 have day jobs and they work with me alongside their day jobs. The remaining all are freelancers, some of them students and freelancing, some of them have chosen freelancing as their career. They're
Hmm.
making far more money than they'll ever will in a job. They have complete control over their time. If they feel like there are months where they are burnt out, they'll just drop a few clients and just settle at a lower number and be totally okay. And when they're ready to grind again, they will just rise up to that. And it's almost like wishful turn on and turn off, which
Hmm.
I love, because that level of clarity and certainly opportunities were not existent when we were growing up. What that
Hmm.
also ends up doing is they're sitting on wealth and corpus that has been built so early and so big that, by virtue of their financial literacy, which is also far more abundant than was previously, they know that they don't have to work for money beyond a certain age. They may still choose to work, but that'll only be for the joy of work and not for the necessity of.
Hmm. Okay. So now in this new order, where you're saying jobs will be done basis, so expertise, you probably end up working with 4, 5, 6 companies. Some cases, people are quoting people, an average young person will now work 20 jobs with 20 companies in his lifetime. What happens to the construct of the enterprise? You've invested in a bunch of starters. Also an entrepreneur. What happens to large corporations, and how must managers and CEOs think about this new sort of gig economy and the workforce of the future?
I feel it'll be 3 concentric circles. The outermost is the gig economy. And that's where there are people who are not captive, they are not on the payrolls, they are on demand, and they are delivering various functions that are necessity, but also administrative in nature, more so repetitive. And it will be a combination of machines and people that will drive that. The inner circle will then be people who are looked at from a short term perspective, but are captive. So you would invest in them, but also always be aware, and acutely so, that they are not going to be there forever. It'll be perhaps a 1 to 3 year stint at best. And you'll use them accordingly basis the experience that they come with. You'll give them a lot more tools, and the organization will not be dependent on people which are in this circle as much as the process that they follow, the tools and techniques that they use to deliver that, and of course the software or the technology that rests on them. And then there'll be a very small, right in the center circle, which is the core. And
Mhm.
that's where I believe that most of the enterprise value will be. These are individuals that will be more so permanent. They're not necessarily founders, but think of them as executives or leaders that are driving the agenda. And they are then responsible for building the concentric circle outwards. And they will execute the role. And then it will be almost like a partnership where, whether in a consulting firm or in a law firm or a audit firm, you'll have this partnership model where almost everyone is equal. And yes, there are first amongst equals, but still it's a partnership, and that's the core of it. And then there is this moving mass that goes and comes, and yet things just fall in place because the processes and the partnership are just so intact.
Mm.
And I firmly believe that that's will be the future enterprise as well. It will be a lot lesser in terms of people or headcount. There will be no pride anymore in declaring that you are X 100,000 people or so. In fact, there'll be pride that you are far lesser and still delivering far more value.
Okay, so leaner organizations, I love your explanation of the three sort of concentric circles, the outer being the most fluid, and then you get a little bit more solid, and then you get this sort of core right at the center, almost like the universe, where it's the core that sort of masterminding, more executive decision making, and then more fluid. Okay, superb. Since you spoke about leaner organizations and lesser dependence on human beings, and you obviously touched upon AI already, how are you seeing AI impact the work of content creators? Let's talk about content creators, and then we can talk about the general economy. How is it impacting your work? Are you seeing it around you? Are you seeing content creators leveraging AI? Is it perceived as a threat, a friend, a foe? What is the chatter around AI?
So the entire content and media industry is going to shift dramatically in the next 10 years. There's not going to be any semblance whatsoever to today and 10 years hence. What will happen is the following is my prediction. It'll be a power law. Will there be very few, extremely small percentage of creators who will get a disproportionate share of eyeballs and attention. And people will attach value to who they are, not necessarily because of their content, but by virtue of their delivery, their mechanism, their longevity, their consistency, their authenticity, and a combination thereof. And then there'll be this long tail of almost indistinguishable content creators, which will just ride on AI. They will automate the entire process of curation, of production, of post-production, of distribution, of automation to different languages, of different music, different editing styles, all of which will be on demand. And there will be no difference between channel one and channel two. In fact, most channels will plummet. There'll be this massive long tail, as I said, which will be more verticals and specifics. And you'll just go to one channel because they have trained their models so well that they can do this one small part of content really, really well, better than most others. And these two worlds will coexist. It's almost equivalent to how education is today, where there are these Stanfords and Harvards of the world that has the disproportionate, almost inexplainable reason of repute attached to them. And that's why they also attract the best talent. And then there's a long tail of institutes that are frankly just similar, same. People
Mm.
still go to them, but that's only because they couldn't make it to the top tier.
Mm.
And they will still attract some value, but that value will keep diminishing over time to a point where it'll be zero margin, and nobody as such will be making top dollars. They'll just survive.
Okay, great prediction. When you're saying, there'll be like a bunch of these people who are sort of producing authentic content, you don't see them leveraging AI, leveraging digital trends, becoming hyper specialized, all the things you mentioned about the long tail. You don't see them also taking in some of these benefits of technology and digitization?
They will do that, but they'll do it for more efficiency gains than for actual value creation, because the value lies in them and not so much the technology. So they will use AI to make their processes and their distribution more efficient, but they're not going to use AI to replace them.
Okay, so it'll be the individual. You will want to follow this individual whose personality you like. Okay, do you see then AI based social media content creators, podcasters, radio jockeys, like literally an avatar who is an AI generated expert talking, connecting with me? I love his sense of humor. I love where he, everything. I love his perks. I love his quirks. I love, his idiosyncrasies. He's a real human being as far as I'm concerned as a consumer. Do you see that happening?
It'll be completely personalized. You wouldn't need to subscribe to a channel because you will create your own channel. There'll be no centralized production. There is no need for centralized production. Like, think about it this way. Today, when a Netflix or any studio invests millions of dollars to produce something, that's because they are the source of that. But what if that source becomes you yourself as the viewer? Because you can then define what you wish to watch, the way you wish to watch it, with whosoever you wish to watch it with. And all of that will be licensed. So if you need a Tom Cruise in here, you will then license, and Tom Cruise will lend himself as an avatar to your production, and you'll get it super cheap. It'll almost be like Tom Cruise as a service, and the same thing will be Christopher Nolan as a service, and the same thing will be Hans Zimmer as a service. And all of the art in the world will become like software as a service, which will be just given to you for adoption. And you will personalize the content for your own self. There'll be no need for a channel or anybody else creating content for you.
Okay, and there will be no need for an individual also creating content for me then.
Say that again.
Are you going to see the individual get displaced? Are you going to see the individual content creator?
As I said, the big ones, because
the
they will know that they have so much clout that they don't need to license themselves. They can continue doing what they're doing and people will still watch, right? So the equivalent of that, like a good example is, say, Mr. Beast. I don't know if Mr. Beast will be there for 10 years from now, and I hope he is, but what Jimmy would know is he's so big that he doesn't need to outsource himself or his digital avatar to anybody. He can still be the person he is, and people will come and watch because he is that big. While everybody else, including an Ankoor Warikoo, they just don't exist because nobody needs that. Like, I can train a model on Ankoor Warikoo's content and within 15 minutes have all of his content in the mannerisms and his entire diktat. And all that I will perhaps miss is his face and his tonality, which again, if Ankur is smart, will just license it.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, you have everything that you need.
Okay. Is that happening? Are there conversations around this happening? Are people approaching you? Are you approaching people to say, hey, let's create a digital avatar?
No, too early. It's going to happen in a few years, but it's in my head eventually.
Okay, great. Okay, let's talk a little bit about AI generally. When you're putting out content, and what are you seeing in consumers, in college students, etc. In your TG, are you seeing a lot of talk about AI? Is there anxiety built up in the system? Is there adoption? Are people trying to learn AI? Are there a lot of questions around AI coming over to you? What's going on with the consumer base?
There are three sections of society right now. There is a section that's still studying, and that section is using AI as a friend because AI right now is helping them with their homework. It's helping them with their education. It's helping them with their learning. It's helping them with their interview prep. It's helping them with their reports. It's essentially something that they're getting more and more comfortable with, to the point that they don't even mistrust it. They just assume that whatever the AI is saying is true. And that generation will benefit itself a lot because they will grow themselves on AI just as we grew ourselves on Google. And for us, the default was not to go to a yellow pages or to call somebody for checking. It was just to Google shit up and we found the answer. And that became our default. Then there's the second generation, which is working right now, and they're shit scared because they clearly know that AI is going to come and disrupt their job far sooner than they expected it to. And they wouldn't have a place to go. And they certainly don't have the mindset of being a student all their life, because all that they thought was padhai ho gayi hai, and now we are done with. And now it's all just work, and earn. But they are in for a rude shock. And that generation is going to, in my opinion, suffer the most, which was exactly the same generation that suffered when they were working and we were students, because we adopted Google and the internet in a wonderful way. And they kept saying, no. It's just a death trap. And they, not surprisingly, died. And then there is a generation which is just way past, and that it frankly couldn't care. So they'll be using AI more as a consumer, just as our parents use WhatsApp. They'll adopt it, they'll use it nicely, but it's not going to change their life. It'll just be more for entertainment purposes than anything else. And all three are going to be very different recipients of AI. The good thing, and it's just luck, complete coincidence, that India is in a position where the first section of students and young people is really big. It's a massive percentage, almost 300, 400 million, if not more. And that means we are favorably set up to enjoy the wave of AI for us as a country, as against most other countries. And that, as I said, is just stroke of luck, but we stand to benefit from.
Okay, very interesting you say that, because of course, half of India's population, 500, 600 million people, are under the age of 26. So of course, we have a massive youth demographic in our favor. But I had a very interesting conversation with someone who runs an edtech company focusing largely on rural India. And she said, look, we have different problems in India. the experts say AI will, solve this education problem. We won't need to train teachers anymore, etc. But there's no electricity in India's villages, and that is a very stark reality. So there's all this juxtaposition of, on one end is so many Indias. You said there's these. You've been in your conversation. You're always looking at these sort of circles. You're looking at different factions of the population in very three-piece sort of approach. India goes beyond three pieces. There's just so many Indias. So making this AI revolution quite complex, in my opinion. And Narendra Modi ji, I think he recently put out something saying we're going to put out this drone Didi, and have women train on drones now. So I think there is a chatter around this, but how they implement AI, and also because the technology changes so rapidly, by the time they set up a program and implement it, the technology will go through yet another shift. So I'm optimistic and hoping that what you're saying pans out, but managing so many Indias and with so much tech change might pose to be a threat. But let's see how it pans out. You also touched upon longevity. You said something about like people will live to 100, maybe 150, etc. Let's go a little bit deeper. How do you see that happening? There's a lot of people injecting stuff. Are you seeing this through injectables? Are you seeing this through just healthier lifestyles? Are you seeing this through more free time now because of the gig economy? You can actually go play some sports. Where are you seeing this trend emerge?
It's just normal progression of medical advancements. There is a disproportionate amount of attention and wealth that is attributed to longevity, and it's a matter of time. We have, within the country itself, forget the world, we've increased our average lifespan by 10 years in the last 30 years, and that's not a trivial feat. And this has been despite all the challenges that the country was facing and going through. So it's going to become more and more, with medical access being provided, with wars and acts of terrorism reducing, with far more, hopefully, control over our natural environments. Climate change, of course, is a big concern, but I think we will have the resolve to fix that in some way or not. And it's not, at least in my opinion, irreversible as yet. So for me, it's not something dramatic. People don't have to become zombies and to inject themselves with something. It's just a natural course of evolution where we will lead ourselves to longer and longer lifespans.
Okay, so longer lifespans, more automation coming. What happens with our days? How do you think people are going to spend their time if they are working these gig economies? You said they'll become wealthier. So you have a wealth effect, you have a lifespan effect. What happens to your time? How do you think people are going to use their time? What's going to take up sort of eyeball share of consumers' time in the future?
A lot of it will just become entertainment. And yes, and when I say entertainment, I don't mean entertainment in the pure sense of it, but entertainment of just keeping your mind occupied to the extent that you numb it. A good corollary to this would be what's often said about the Roman Empire, where the Roman Empire had these wonderful shows, and the entire city would just gather and witness those shows, and those were entertainment, and they were more so, as it said, I'm not an expert, done to distract them from the real issues. A good example of that then, from a futuristic perspective, became The Matrix, where you are just sleeping in a pod and you're living your life in a dream world where you're frankly doing whatever you want to do and be whosoever you want to be. But all that you're doing is just entertaining yourself while existing, serving someone else's purpose. So I think a few things may pan out. There'll be universal basic income. Everyone will just get money to survive. And where will that money come from? It'll come from the small set of corporations who will make disproportionate wealth, serving the needs of everyone, mostly entertainment. There'll be complete virtual existence. So people will not live so much in the real world as they will in the virtual world. And they'll have their own avatars and their own lives. And they will become more and more seamless, with not just things like these, which look bulky today, but matter of a few years, everything will go in. It'll be embedded in your skin. It'll be a chip in your body, and the next thing you know, you can on demand witness and be wherever you want to be. And everything from education to training to learning will simply be a download. You don't have to go to school. You can download the periodic table, and you can download Newton's laws, and you can download algebra. and you'll just be aware. So it will become democratized to the extent where everyone has access to the same thing, just as everyone has access to the same smartphone. My smartphone is the same smartphone that most likely an Elon Musk or a Jeff Bezos uses, and there's no distinction. And they have the same internet. And the only difference between them and me is the kind of people that they spend time with, but not the tools that they have access to, at least not hardware. And that is going to be a game changer. Now, whether that leads to a downgrade of society or an upgrade in society is anybody's guess. Because if people are numb and they're not stepping into each other's paths and everybody's getting universal basic income, then no, one can argue it'll be a better world, because nobody will have any random thoughts, and there'll be no evil, and there'll be no need for you to go and kill somebody or rape somebody or steal from somebody. But at the same time, is that what humans were born to do? Don't know.
But do you really think that there might be a situation in maybe 5, 10, 20 years even, that we will move to universal basic income with
100%?
100%. Okay.
Absolutely. There will not be work for everybody. There will not be work for everybody. It's going to be done by robots. It's going to be done by machines. Absolutely.
So you're seeing a world where you're seeing sort of a monopoly, oligopoly situation, very smart people who want to work, very motivated, producing wealth for governments, and then the government playing the role of this equitable distributor to the rest, large chunks of the population. So almost a capitalist and socialist economy coexisting at the same time.
That's a wonderful picture of it, and I really hope that that's how it unfolds. Yes.
Yes, but that's how you're possibly predicting it might pan out. Okay, wow. Okay. I mean, there is obviously a large school of people who think like that, but let's see. But thank you for sharing that prediction. Can we shift to a little bit about books, because you're a writer, and you've written 2 amazing books. So firstly, thank you for putting those out to the world. Curious to see what the money book is about. What are your thoughts on reading? Are people still reading? Are people going to continue reading? Is that still going to exist? Are these bookshops? There's always this talk about, oh, the libraries are going to shut down. Some of them did. Bookstores are going to shut down. A lot of them did. What do you think is going to happen in the future? What's the future of literature?
Reading is hard work. And I again go back to the same thing. I'm a very realist in that sense. One doesn't have to read anymore. So why should one read? Because it's not the reading that makes the difference. It's the absorption of the knowledge that you gain from that reading that makes the difference. It's not the
act of reading. Okay. You don't need.
It's not the act of reading. So if there's a way for you to get that information in a manner that's conducive to who you are and the world that you're raised in, right? Why should anybody complain? And if you really think about it, most of the people crying that people aren't reading enough is the publishing industry and authors. Well, surprise, surprise, because they stand to lose the most if this industry were to be perished. But I do believe that it's an eventuality. It's complete eventuality. Nobody needs books anymore. Why should they? Because there's enough and more content. There's enough and more literature. You can hear a book. You can see a book. You can see a movie about the book.
Yeah.
You can watch a book. You can have multiple people debate that book. You can have reviews of the book. You can have snippets and summaries of the book. And at the end of it, if it's just making you smarter in terms of the knowledge that you absorb, it serves its purpose. So as long as there is a supply of people who are willing to share and create content, and enough and more individuals who realize that that content is important and valuable, I think that balance works. Whether it becomes a book, who cares?
Okay. That's beautifully framed. As long as the supply is there, as long as knowledge and ideas are being shared and absorbed, the medium, so to speak, doesn't really matter. You could consume it in any fashion. Okay, very beautifully framed. In terms of literature, just to stay on this, do you think authors, storytellers, fiction, non-fiction, are going to be slowly but surely replaced by the advent of AI being able to put out novels, put out how to change your life, self-help books, etc., because the models are being trained as we speak? So are we going to see displacement in that space as well?
All forms of media will become personalized. That's the headline. You don't need creators. There's enough and more that has been created in the world for any model to train itself on. Any model. And to be smart about it, and to be meaningful about it, and to be deliberate about it. What isn't yet delivered and established is high level of personalization, where I can mold that content in a manner that I absorb best. Because that requires the model to be also trained on you as an individual and your consumption patterns. Once that is done, which is a matter of time, all forms of content will become personalized. Not just books, movies, education, books, every piece of content that we consume today, including sports. I'll be like, hey, I wanna watch Roger Federer play Sinner, which they've never, because Roger retired before Sinner came onto the board. And I want to see how they play at their peak. Roger peak, Sinner peak, play a Wimbledon final. And that will be a Wimbledon final.
Okay. So you're saying literally people are going to curate their own preferences and the models are going to be able to produce whatever you ask for. Okay. This is a great segue into the education piece, because this puts a lot of onus on the consumer. And if you're putting the consumer in the seat of the decision maker, saying, hey, you now decide what you want to consume, you're hoping then the education system is building up these next generation individuals to have that sensibility to be able to curate this sort of very personalized experience. So what is your advice for educators? Let's take the factions of society, right? One pillar, primary pillar. And since you've written a book, this is, and your next product's on education, what advice would you give to educators, high schools, colleges? Let's just stick to colleges and schools for right now. What should they be doing? How should they be thinking about the future? How should they be thinking about curriculum, and thinking about sort of future proofing these kids and the curriculum? What should they do?
I'll start with the honest admission that they're doomed. I don't think schools and colleges will exist in a decade or 2 decades. I don't think they will be needed. I don't think they have been needed for the longest time, but they've existed because there was no substitute. Now there is one, and a worthy one. And I think that the world of education is going to become a clear hub and spoke model. What I mean by that is there'll be a hub, and that hub will be the best educator in that field, irrespective of where they are. So for a 3rd grade science, there will be 5 people in the world who do that job better than anybody ever can. They are in the top tier, and they're the hub. So they will create the magnum opus of that curriculum, should they wish to. But there'll always be somebody who wishes to. They'll be responsible for defining the standard. They'll be responsible for almost the curriculum as well, because the curriculum is not a CBSE and an ICSE and an IB anymore. The curriculum is global. You at 3rd grade should know this. And if you think that you can be learning 4th grade, please be our guest and learn 4th as well. And then there'll be spokes who will be trained on that content, certified by these hubs as facilitators of that knowledge in geographical senses, because that's always needed for education, a manner of debate, a manner of conversation, a manner of clarification that always helps and feeds into that knowledge. It's the same way where when we were growing up, and I don't know if you remember, but it was certainly true for me growing up in Delhi, every beauty parlor in Delhi used to have a board outside that said trained by Shahnaz Hussain. Sure. And I just believe that Shahnaz Hussain is some person who's omnipresent, because she was just there everywhere. And how is that possible? Because to her credit, she came up with this hub and spoke model in the beauty world when nobody had ever imagined. And she's like, there's only one Shahnaz Hussain, so I can only do this much because I'll only have 24 hours in a day. But if I have to create an empire, what I need to do is validate, authenticate, certify, and train people who can then go and claim that they understand the Shahnaz Hussain way of doing things. And that's what happened. And it was a success. It was the first mega franchise that the world had ever seen of knowledge, not of product, not of service, but knowledge.
And in your view of this hub and spoke, these are going to be human beings, right? The spokes are going to be human beings.
Needn't be. Again, as I said, the spoke is, I think we as humans have to detach ourselves with the fact that we are the only ones capable of doing a job. Not anymore. And whether you like it or don't like it, the truth is that there will be somebody else in less than 5 years who will do your job far, 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 far better than you ever can or are even intellectually capable of. So no, it could be, go back to the same thing. It's a personalized bot that is trained on the hub and on the personalized student to understand exactly how to deliver the message should there be a clarification. And the person doesn't have to go anywhere. They could just log on and have the same hub speak to them in a digital avatar, but in a manner that the student completely receives and receives well.
Okay.
And so that just eliminates the need for schools and colleges.
Schools and colleges. Okay. So you're saying schools and colleges, maybe 10, 20 years out of the equation, and then we shift to this knowledge economy where one or two, a couple of people become sort of predominant in their areas, and then these spokes disseminate this knowledge or information globally. You're saying now you don't even, obviously, the world without borders, you don't even, it doesn't even matter. So there'll be sort of universal life skills. A 6-year-old should have these sort of skills. There'll be some sort of universal standards that potentially develop. Okay, wow.
And you pick and choose. You pick and choose whatever you want. You want an expert in Indian history, and within that a certain period, sure, there's an expert for that. So individual educators will become far more powerful than the collectives. So right now, it's the collectives. It's the big schools, the big universities, and the professors' names are almost invisible, except for a few. But imagine the best professors rising to the top, because they will then become the masters of knowledge and distribution. And there'll be no middlemen required in the form of a school and college to aggregate them, because technology will do that job.
Okay, wow, pretty radical. And I mean, radical, but obviously everything you say it with so much conviction that I am almost able to envision the future that you
No, none of my predictions have ever come true. So all of this is bullshit till it does.
Okay. As you sort of think about this, sort of future, let's call it an educational ecosystem. What are some of the skills you think it's imperative to pass on through this hub and spoke model? What are critical skills for the future?
For educators or for students?
For students, what should students be absorbing?
There is only one thing that you can do, and that is to never lose your curiosity. Never believe that you don't need to be a student again. That's the only thing that will save you in a world where you cannot predict the future, and the future will change far faster than you ever believed it to. The only hope in hell you have is to remain a student forever. And that is unfortunately not something that we are taught. We are not taught to know how to study, how to consume, how to comprehend, and how to absorb knowledge. We're just taught how to give an exam. And that's what we do commendably well. But when real life hits, shit breaks loose. So the only thing which I'm not so optimistic about, because it's not being done, is to train our generation of students to be perpetually curious. Why does this happen? Because we're now going to live in a world where every question will have an answer. Every question will have an answer. There'll be no longer an answer which is, this is how things are. No. Every question will have an answer. So what's needed is just the ability to ask questions.
Okay, great. Okay, so sense of curiosity never goes out of fashion. Going to be needed, hopefully, to eternity. I'm going to ask you this last question, and then we can close. Are you generally optimistic about the future? You know, in our conversations, we've had some naysayers who said, look, the world's in a pretty bad shape. Anything could happen. You know, we could have climate change, flooding, complete eradication of the planet, AI take over, no jobs. There is a lot of negative sentiment built up in the system. And then there are the optimists who say, look, technology is going to come, lives are going to become better, more free time, people play sports, go back to watching theater, as you were talking about this Roman theater, etc. And they predict a sort of more optimistic scenario. Where are you on this spectrum? Are you more optimistic? Are you what are you seeing? What are you seeing?
Highly
Is
optimistic.
there a gloom boom scenario in your mind as well?
Highly optimistic, extremely optimistic. I've always believed in the tenacity of the human race, and I believe that we are wonderful adapters to whatever is the change. Not everyone likes it, but there's always a tipping point of percentage people that embrace it and create the pathway for the world to follow. That's always been historically the case, will forever be the case in the future. Whether we'll be on Earth, whether we'll be on Mars, whether we'll be in a completely new dimension, who cares? As long as the race survives and we have each other growing, I think that matters and matters the most. And on that front, I'm extremely optimistic that we will continue as a race and we'll continue to adapt to whatever is hitting us, irrespective of how grave it may seem in that moment.
Okay, so you're a believer. You're a believer in the human spirit. You're a believer in
100%.
human ability to adapt to situations. Okay, this was terrific, Ankur Warikoo. Thank you so much for giving me a little glimpse into your epic brain. This has been an absolutely epic conversation, and I look forward to staying in touch. I love your thoughts. Very radical, very pragmatic, and very sort of just cutting through the shit and just stating your mind as it is. Lovely conversation. Thank you so much once again for doing this.
Thank you so much, Vibha. All the best with the book. And I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All the best. Bye.